So I got drafted because as a way to do a workaround of guardrails that AAAI sets up. And of course, we know how effective guardrails are for AI and other systems.
Adjustable autonomy.
And we made some maneuvering, which shifted everything. So we are going to be Kafka-esque. Oh, I'm sorry, Klein-esque here in terms of covering things. And the root of this is in 4 parts based on something we did 25 years ago, a obscure...
Was it really that long ago?
It was 21 years ago.
Okay, I feel young.
21, yes. Common Ground Coordination and Joint Activity. It was a book chapter. It was then followed up by a IEEE Intelligent Systems short paper focusing exclusively on AI agents and their participation in joint activity. It built on multiple years of projects by the 4 of us.
Still ongoing, our collaboration is.
That's right. So this is the other paper, which is much shorter. By the way, the Common Ground and Joint Activity chapter is on the top 10 list of my favorite papers among specialists in critical digital services. That's the only segment of the world that ever read it. And they all read it like a Bible. And the reason they read it like a Bible and share it all through their community is because it turned out, though it was written 10 years before we knew about these people, or I knew about these people. I'm not sure. I know Gary barely knows about these people now. Hi, Gary. They all said it captured what they had to do as a distributed anomaly response system, where they could be having players engaged from all around the world, as outages can have implications that spread across many time zones in terms of activities and loss of critical activities and valued services. So what this is going to be is in 4 parts. We're going to say a few things that Gary would have said if he was here, and he's on there so he can speak up for himself at some point.
That means you have to take a breath every now and then, at least, David.
Oh, well, don't worry, he'll have his time. And Gary wanted to talk about how expertise is essential. That's always the case, no matter what technology, what period, what setting. He has studied judgment under uncertainty and risk in naturalistic settings for the last 40 years or more. Every wave of technology changes what forms of expertise are necessary and how we grow it, and we're certainly in, from his and all of our perspectives, a crisis about our ability to utilize and grow expertise. Paul Feltovich, who died a little over a year ago, was a partner in all of this. His view is our adversary is reductionism, and reductionism is us. Our tendency to oversimplify. Interestingly, his career, one central effort in his career is studying the growth of expertise in cardiology. Martin was talking about cardiology. Well, Paul studied how they got expert over time. Foundational work, and highlights the way oversimplifications can get in the way of growing effective and usable forms of expertise. Me, I will talk about what we learned from AI Gold Rush 1, that all cognitive work is joint, distributed, and situated, depending on whether you want to take the paper that Eric and I wrote, or the paper that Ed Hutchins wrote, or the paper that Bill Clancy wrote that he isn't here, which we had hoped to have, right, about these 3 words that capture how work actually happens with automation in high-risk, high-performance settings. Which leads me to the question that is relevant today, how to design AI or software agents to be collaborative players in a joint activity space when disruptions arise. Well, Jeff, all right, at the same time, he was working on an architecture called Chaos. Of course, he's here to stand up for himself. And he wanted to close the fundamental asymmetry that had appeared in collaborative coordinated activity between people and machines. So competencies at coordinated activity. And he says we can close that asymmetry, by using certain kinds of policies and protocols in the design of a distributed system.
Somewhat close, at least.
Somewhat, yes. So as it says at the end there, or can we? So a reminder of where we are. We're always at the same place. This is from the Andy Warhol Museum. This is, he collected ephemera, right? And he had them all filed away to use in his pop art. And when we toured the museum a few months back, this was on the table demonstrating a collection of ephemera. Machines are taking over, outdoing people at their work now and soon will outthink them. Oh, what once was new is now old, or what's old is now new. I don't know. So what was that paper about? It was about common ground as something that people do, building, repairing, right? And a commitment to build and repair common ground, or grounding, because it's not really a noun, it's a process. It originated in linguistics. And we were applying it to joint activity at new scales, not simply a linguistic interaction. So here's an example of common ground, anesthetic practice under surgery. It's a neurosurgery case in particular. It comes from one of my students' dissertations, Lila Johannesson. The attending anesthesiologist re-enters the operating room mid-case and says nice and tachycardic. The senior resident in charge of the case says, yeah, but better than nice and bradycardic. What in the world was going on? Well, in fact, they all completely understood each other because this person had to supervise multiple operating rooms, each with a resident in charge who was continuously available handling anesthetic management. They had both worked on the case and setting it up originally, understood the backdrop of the patient, the kind of problems, the kind of surgery, the kinds of problems that are likely to develop or could be critical to develop for that case. All right? So he walks in and says, immediately in an open space, can look at the instruments, things going on, and says, hey, heart rate's high. Right? And of course, it's sarcastic because it's physicians. Mm-hmm. Notice how telegraphic this is. Right? And the senior resident says, yeah, but it's better than nice and bradycardic. He just said, I recognize the risk of high heart rate. I took an action. I took too strong an action, and I overshot in the other direction. All of that was conveyed, and an outsider would have no idea what was going on. So as a simple example from this, we use it in that paper. So let's elaborate on Gary's theme of expertise is essential, and every wave of technology undermines how we get it and apply it in the real world. Some of his points are, we see a lot of lip service to the value of expertise, but most of tech developers are holding tight to major misconceptions. They miss things like tacit knowledge and deep knowledge, and Gary may want to comment on those as we get further. But most important is they think they understand, they're really miscalibrated about expertise, right? They think they understand it, and they have misconceptions, right? So that's the real diagnostic problem in terms of how this works. So in tech gold rushes, what happens? Deployments of new capabilities undercut past means for generating expertise, the expertise that's necessary to make systems work. Gaps in expertise emerge, and painfully and slowly, a bunch of ad hoc adaptations play out to fill the gaps and reestablish the kinds of judgment and expertise that are necessary to make a system work, because the technology in itself is incomplete. Right? An ongoing example of this that we could discuss at length, controversially, because, right, is misenvisioning the effects of AI coding. Examples are, well, this will be great for entry-level people, but that undermines the avenues for growing expertise because with AI slop and AI mistakes, it turns out you need experienced people to debug it. So more expertise is needed. We have quotes from very skilled software engineers saying, it can help, it seems to help me and other highly experienced expert software engineers, but it's terrible in the hands of entry-level people. And then we have a study from NVIDIA and Alibaba this year already, where they took AI coding and put it in a realistic activity setting. So they actually set it up to run based on real data over 200 days of a continuous development and integration process. So put it in a full, rich activity matrix over extended periods of time, and you can read the paper, but it basically came back that the AI coding was a disaster. It was completely unhelpful, got in the way, nobody could figure out what it was doing, and it kept doing things that were inappropriate, even though it passed the tests for deployment. And remember, the fundamental rise of continuous development and deployment is that you can't test everything in advance. Even if you really run the tests great, you can't anticipate all the complexities that happen from contact with real production traffic. And by the way, if your system isn't changing, your company is dying. Right? So the company is changing its systems, its products, its stakeholders. The pressures it's under are all changing as it grows over time. So we can talk about this. We've had like 4 podcasts pulling together experts in software engineering about how they have to find ways to use AI coding. And everyone has their own adaptations to make it work for them, which is also consistent with the findings that when you don't provide an integrated system for how the whole thing will work together, what will people do? A lot of ad hoc mechanisms to kind of make it work. That's part of the adaptive processes that go on with people trying to get value out of things. So we have this repeated pattern, undercutting sources of expertise with new technology, rediscovering its critical need. The sources and forms of the expertise that are needed change, and we haphazardly rebuild these sources of power. Quote, that's the title of one of Gary's books. See, Gary, it is all you.
Thank you.
All right, Paul Feltovich. Our adversary is reductionism. All right, so Paul's empirical work highlighted some general findings about the growth of expertise. It's specialized, not general. Anybody notice this one? It's specialized, not general. What is everybody saying they're doing with AI today? AGI, general intelligence. The research says it's not general, it's specialized, tailored to the context where it has grown and is expressed. It's situated. Back to that word that Bill Clancy and others in the cognitive ethnography put forward in the mid to late 80s. It grows based on experience. Again, Gary's research with variabilities and disruptions that arise across situations and context. Requires experience with variation. It grows, it becomes flexibly adaptive to a wider range of factors and influences. Cognitive flexibility is the name for Paul's approach to training expertise. It is sensitive to limits, noise, and uncertainties. It knows something about what it doesn't know. What do we have that doesn't know that? And why was I asking those questions of Martin this morning? Very important. But the growth of expertise stalls, gets stuck in stale models, and becomes resistant to revisions and adaptations. There's lots more in the syntheses about what research on expertise has shown. The tech myth in AI Gold Rush 1 and all the tech gold rushes since and today is we can get low-cost machine substitutes for human experience through technology advances. New forms of algorithms and computation will substitute for human expertise, and there's always this idea that it will be cheaper, no matter the effort and cost of generating it, because I'm not sure how someone says that LLMs are cheaper. given the amount of computation, the amount of data, the amount of processing, the amount of money, the amount of water, this is anything but cheap. It flunks the biological reality tests that you have to work effectively under restricted resources, right? So this is not biology. Paul's reductionist adversary. How do we escape? Well, actually, Gary's career in developing naturalistic studies of decision-making in situ, back to situated, in situ, what is going on is a broader set of activities, a flow of activity that's going on. Aha, when we do that, what do we see? We see that there are always technologies. The human species is defined by developing tools and tooling to aid them in their activities, right? So how do they become collaborative and coordinate with others in a joint activity space when disruptions to standard methods of acting and interacting are disrupted by events? Those disruptions can include new opportunities to achieve goals, where the standard plans were making trade-offs and priorities across possible goals and outcomes. So you can do better sometimes. The history of AI since 90 is you can study situated activities in abstract convoy problems. Abstract convoy problems capture many patterns about adaptation and joint activity. I have used it for years in teaching people about how to design joint systems. We used it in the 2005 paper. We've used it in projects since. It's a critical thing, and we'll probably talk a little, Dave Alderson and I will probably talk about it a little bit maybe tomorrow as how we use it and why we use it and how it allows us to deal with this, answering this question. The key thing in this is time matters all the time. Tempos, keeping pace with events, synchronizing. If you can't show me time, you've never reached the activity, situated activity, distributed activity stage. And so much of what is being proposed is out of time. So what did we develop in 2005 that made it novel? By the way, if you noticed anyone, there's a temporal asymmetry. The chapter was published in 2005. The short paper that we wrote afterwards was published in 2004. That's because of lags in book publishing versus a journal where the editor was a friend of ours. Yeah, working around constraints. So lag in the real world is always going to be present of many messy constraints. So what we were doing is laying out what had to be there as competencies at coordination, and that when we try to endow algorithms agency to do things on their own so good that we can actually delegate authority to them, we never think about the coordinative competencies that people have to work together in a joint activity space. Notice a joint activity space is not a team. There does not have to be any sense of being a team. The basic compact, though, is a commitment, human-to-human commitment to align their activities and to adapt relative to what happens and challenges the situation. What that means is they're willing to reprioritize, sacrifice, and reconfigure what they do rather than stick to standard. Let me give you a simple real-world example. Think of a military helicopter flying near Washington National Airport or flying near John Wayne Airport, right? The military helicopter will not participate in a basic compact to adjust its activities and priorities to accommodate traffic landing at those commercial airports. And instead, they come too close all the time. That is a lack of a basic compact between different kinds of activities at a fairly large scale, right? That leads to this disruptions, danger, incidents, and fatal accidents. When we lay out these competencies like managing the cost of coordination, which is a continuous effortful thing, Adding AI agents to collaborative activity adds a lot of extra costs, right? And because it often speaks up at the wrong time in the wrong way when you're busy with critical things, because it has no sense of time of what's going on. There's a fundamental asymmetry between people and software AI agents. So Dave Alderson and I will talk tomorrow morning about coordination late or coordination last is the norm and how we develop. We try to endow more in our agents, make them more autonomous, make them more worthy of us giving authority to them in real-world tasks. Right? However, AI agents misbehaving and miscoordinating is a risk out of control. And I mean that point blank. It is a risk in the modern world. Remember, agentic only just added 2 letters to what Jeff wrote a book about. He called them software agents. They called it agentic. 2 letters and it's a world of difference, right, Jeff? Not really. And we can run through, you can see strong and wrong from Sidney Decker and I or others. What we're talking about, and I think is the key thing to the massed effort that Jeff has started in London and now here, is what is the coordination first architecture look like and what steps do we have? A lot of this is what we know that we didn't know in 2005. By the way, Gary, I told you this before, that there are a wide variety of PhDs who want to thank you and I, Jeff, for mentioning how critical managing the cost of coordination was in our papers and then doing absolutely nothing about it. So they all got to do several dissertations exploring how this really works and the paradoxes of controlling the cost of coordination in a variety of critical or time-pressed situations. So they wanted to thank us for giving them great opportunities by not finishing the job we started.
It's a hard problem, like a lot of problems, right?
Well, in a sports-crazed society, it's really kind of amazing that we can ignore it in our professional work when we just had 2 basketball tournaments finish where coordinated activity is absolutely critical, and it changes several times during the tournament, during a game, right, as they run different plays. And the ability to maintain a fighting edge in coordinated joint activity is on display, and the dance is difficult, and it always requires some work, even when you're enormously talented at doing it. And the idea that we can have machines that skip the whole dance, no, I don't think so. In fact, it's the other way around. When you make machines that are more powerful, you make the dance happen in new ways at new scales, and then don't tell anybody how to do the dance. It's really amazing. Hell, now you can do the dance at a societal scale or a regional scale or an industry scale. Oh, okay, well, how are we going to do the coordinate? No, use those same old things you did with organizational, jurisdictional restrictions and rigidities. No. So, Jeff, he wants to close this asymmetry between people and machines in joint activity. They've not been designed to participate effectively, strong in what they can do by themselves, weak in how they coordinate and synchronize with others. He wanted to, in his Chaos project with others at IHMC, develop architectures to reduce the asymmetry. He had a variety of mechanisms by which he was architecting a distributed system. Those are, I think, we know much more today. And we also recognize how what you were working on then has limits, even then, and certainly in today's role. So the questions to Jeff is the asymmetry fundamental? At the time we wrote the paper, he said, no, for true now, but not in the future. I went, no, I think it's true forever. Now I'm willing to admit maybe it isn't completely true in the future. It could be in the right architecture where they can maybe do as much or more than a secondary role in support of human competencies. The big issue is we never try. We never, ever try, hardly. Brahms was an exception, right? Remember Clancy?
Brahms was Martin Searhouse.
Yeah, right, and Clancy. right? Remember Clancy was on the list back in the 80s about we need to do this, right? So there are some efforts to do this kind of thing. The question is, do any have this today? Given the gold rush and the hurry to implement new algorithmic technologies in high-risk critical activities. All right, is anyone willing to slow down and be thorough to try to address these things?
They're going to do it last when they get done with everything else.
That's all. Yes. QED. So MAST is about let's architect, design, and test for joint activity in a space of interdependent roles. There's always going to be multiple human roles and different machine actors of heterogeneous pedigree. They're not all going to be the latest thing. There's multiple threads of activities intertwined over time, right, which adjust and change as events occur, opportunities arise, obstacles are encountered, and they are tangled interdependencies across multiple layers. All modern systems are distributed and layered. Therefore, all problems are ones of coordination and synchronization. Lauren Hochstein, last year, summarizing it in that line, what that means is if you draw your scope where you don't see, right, layered, distributed agents interacting, human and machine, and miss coordination and synchronization, you've drawn your boundary too narrow. Your real system is larger. And when we draw it out there, that's the challenge and opportunity that we have in MAST. Okay, that's the walkthrough of the stuff from the four of us and what we wrote back 20 plus years ago. There's Lauren's line. And if you want to have a sense of this, just look at the October 2025 AWS outage, a wide swath outage in a layered, tangled, distributed systems with strange loops and circular dependencies, knocking out 2 AI companies' services for 16 hours. It is a great, simple example of, and I could give you more and more and more of these. Remember, the risk of miscoordination of autonomous capabilities, real capabilities, is a risk out of control in today's world.
And we're dealing with worldwide scale of these kinds of risks now.
Yeah, yeah.
Unforeseen consequences.
I will keep my mouth shut about a recent event involving AI and fatalities. So I don't get deported, since I don't know where they'll deport me.
Take your choice.
Gary, you have questions, comment?
Just
questions already. And Gary.
I don't know.
Yeah,
always.
we've got 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry if I went a little long. I was trying to add a little color.
There's color.
Go ahead.
I just want to say that when is coordination good and perfect between people and or any systems, right? We use whatever. We use a knife. We don't understand it completely, and we cut our hands. I mean, coordination is always an issue, isn't it?
Yes. When I wrote the laws when I first compiled laws that govern cognitive work and adaptive systems, the laws of cooperation started with coordination costs continually. And notice the reductionist myth that Paul highlights. People think that growth of expertise can be free, that coordinated joint activity can happen, again, low cost. These things can be stereotyped. And the empirical history is overwhelmingly clear in a way that should not be in question, because military history shows those, and it's measured in, as Meyer Finkel wrote in his book on this, the measurement is rivers of blood. If you want a quantitative measure, right? Those who can adapt and coordinate better, suffer less losses and usually win. And those who are rigid and slow lag in adaptation and coordination, the coordination then breaks down. Those are the ones that are paying the rivers of blood. So we have But Gary and I and others and Jeff and Paul have much less gory examples of why this works and why we should pay attention to these kinds of research results. The issue is we need to help people build new kinds of architectures that are sensitive to these issues. And I think certainly in the work that I've done with Dave and others, we have a lot more stuff that we can show you can work because we've done examples where it does work. And we'll talk about that some more tomorrow morning. They're not full architectures, though. And they don't have the tooling to go with it to make it easy to create new versions of this. We have to have the tools and tooling to do this, not just custom work in one particular example. That's what Brahms is.
That's one of the reasons we're here.
Yes,
to see how we can build better AI in that way.
Yeah.
Together.
Well, the infrastructure may not be AI per se.
Yes, right.
Right. I mean, the infrastructure, it's what tooling allows you to do this, because we now have an end that we can aim for, and we can specify some of the requirements for this kind of an architecture. Yeah.
Do we want to let Gary say anything before we go on to the next question? I'll give you the mic here.
Are you gonna get it?
Gary?
I think he has a mic.
I didn't hear the question.
Do you want to say anything?
A couple of comments. First of all, a caveat about Paul's work on simplification. And it's clear the problems that are created by oversimplification. But we also have to recognize that there can be problems of undersimplification. So it isn't simply a question of trying to represent all the complexity, because that becomes overwhelming. There's an art to how to adaptively represent the appropriate complexity in a situation.
And may I suggest that AI summarization illustrates the depth of that problem? I got a little smile from somebody.
Second is just an anecdote, and I may have the details wrong. World War II, breakout of World War II, Germany versus France. Turns out that I believe the French equipment was better designed than the German equipment, the tanks and so forth. But what the Germans had was they had radios in their tanks. And that changed the equation. They could talk to each other in terms of coordination in a way that the French could not. And that was one of the tipping points.
So Gary, that is correct. And if you look at Meyer Finkel's book, it will lay out that and other related ones, because what he lays out is the whole series of organizational, technological, and operational and tactical that led to rigidity. The French rigidity, despite having better tanks in 1940 on certain standard quantitative criteria that somebody might test in a lab, right, had a rigidity at all of those operational levels, all undermined by underinvesting in communications that would be robust under disrupting conditions, and therefore communication broke down and contributed mightily to the being routed.
Right. And one more observation from a friend of mine, Leon Siegel, who was a helicopter pilot, described his helicopter training where helicopter teams are two people. And so each individual would learn to fly the helicopter, and that was the bulk of the training they received. Then at the end, they would get some training on how to coordinate with each other. And Leon said they got it backwards. They should start working as teams and then build the skills to go along with it. By building the individual skills, they had to unlearn all the bad habits that they developed by thinking that they were going to do the whole mission themselves. And so the initial training was, in some ways, dysfunctional. It should have started with the coordination rather than ended with it.
QED, thank you, Gary. coordination late and last, or coordination early, first, or early and more critically first? Right? If you don't have the umbrella, how do you orchestrate the parts so they will work together? Because they will have to adapt in together to reinforce, to reprioritize, to reconfigure. Those are fundamental aspects of coordinated activity in a joint activity space. They will happen. It's not they're rare. They are what it means to engage in coordinated activity. Thank you, Gary.
Okay.
We have a question here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. This is all really interesting and important kind of work, and you're calling attention to really major problems. I think one way I would begin to frame part of this is to note that a lot of times people think of these socio-technical systems as sort of the AI is there. It's something that's in a box. It's got hardware and it's got software, but actually the same hardware will behave differently depending on what software you put in it. The same hardware and software will behave differently depending on what institution where you put it. If you put it in a Wikipedia rather than Facebook, it may behave differently.
Yes.
Similarly, if you put it if there's a different society where it's operating, like Silicon Valley or Beijing or Berlin, it'll behave differently. And it may even be in a different ecosystem, like in Starlink satellites of Elon Musk might behave differently than it does on the Earth. And so it seems like the challenges that you guys are talking about really have to do with what we might call the institution-ware, society-ware, or maybe more broadly just the community-ware. And I'm interested in what kinds of proposals you would have for designing community-ware. And it seems to me that it really gets into political economics, kinds of issues that people deal with in political economics, in sociology and so on, where, what are the institutional motives of the organizations where this stuff is happening? And if you've got all these technical insights about how to do this stuff and nobody's doing it, well, then the question is, well, what's...
Okay, I'll give you...
Yeah. I'd be really interested in the kinds of structural ideas you have for that kind of design at that level.
This is not the first time someone has made that point.
Yeah.
Right? And the answer is my straightforward standard answer is every discipline, every line of inquiry offers something of value to understanding joint and distributed adaptive systems. But adaptive systems, we now understand a great deal about how adaptive systems work, function and malfunction across scales. And I can give you an example. There's 3 ways adaptive systems break down. There's 3 capabilities you need to offset those potentials to break down. Almost nobody talks about them, but there are only 3. And we can look at them. So we understand in the last 15 years a tremendous new set of stuff about adaptive systems across scales. All disciplines contribute to that body of knowledge. But that body of knowledge goes beyond any single contributing line of inquiry. And what happens is my sociology or social systems, social science friends go, yes, this is all this. And, this is all stuff we look at. Elinor Ostrom, reciprocity. Nobel Prize 2009. Does it matter? Absolutely. What the social scientists say about that doesn't get us anywhere. They can describe when you have it and when you lost it. The engineers don't know what to do with it. How do I do that in systems? How is that important in safety? Yet, if you look at the new stuff that's come out with a real science base, it says, right, the reciprocity that she indicates turns out to be absolutely critical. Now we don't have to talk about this tomorrow morning now. It turns out to be absolutely critical in joint coordinated activity. That reciprocity turns out to be an actionable aspect of the basic compact that we talked about in 2005. And we can talk about how organizations or societies lose the ability for mutual assistance under times of stress. And what country could I be talking about? Where reciprocity is on its deathbed, right? In the terms of mutual assistance, willingness to align versus pursuing what Al Roth in his 2012, from a microeconomics point of view, called defecting from a common enterprise, where each was pursuing their own goals in a matching or cross matching market, like the kidney exchange program. All right, that everyone can pursue their goals, but in a system that allows everyone not to get their best outcome, but a good outcome. And that maximizes good outcomes for the largest group, and that those systems unravel if they're not set up right, because people defect pursuing their own advantage, even at the disadvantage to others and to all, because the overall system performs less productively. So we can draw on all these things. I can turn around and draw from robust control engineering and bring that in. The issue is it's a new synthesis and a radical reframing. And since you brought it up, people can reframe. Machines can't at all. No one has an idea how you would make a machine. Most of them don't know why they would want to, because they have the right answer. So why would I reframe? But people can reframe, but it's very difficult for, who are some of the people who talk about reframing that are left? Gary and I are among the few who have the cognitive psychology background of how reframing works. It's hard for people to do. It creates a lot of dissonance. They don't always do it. Even when you do it pretty well, you can still fail to do it and then kick yourself. Why didn't I recognize and switch the frame? We have developed over the years many techniques. Gary's are slightly different and effective, and mine are slightly different and effective too, in ways to assist in reframing. New forms of representation, new forms of cooperation and interaction, all can contribute to enhance the possibility of reframing. The thing that started this morning, Henry, thank you, is when automation misbehaves and miscoordinates, it's because it's acting in a way that fits its model of the world when it's not in that world anymore. It can't close that context gap. And that's where reframing comes in, because people can act mindlessly too, literal-minded too. We continue to act in a way appropriate to our model, how the world worked, how we thought it worked, when the world has changed, right? Those were the first studies I did about nuclear power accidents, and the first findings in 1981, right? Which is how people got stuck in stale models. They didn't get the diagnosis wrong. The diagnosis they had early in the deteriorating situation was plausible and reasonable to at least consider, right? The problem was they got stuck and didn't revise as the situation changed and new evidence came in, and actions had different than expected effects. Right? And so we've seen this in the laboratory, we've seen it in the 1920s research, we've seen it in Gary's field studies of naturalistic decision-making. And so it's a great example on that list of coordinative competencies. It's a cognitive one, right? So somebody reframes. Oh, by the way, in the critical digital services incident response, how often does it turn out that a critical reframing has to happen? Pretty frequently. Who makes the critical reframing? Someone with a lot of experience over time, because remember, it's always changing. And they all of a sudden realize there's some change in the past has an impact that produced the unexpected behavior, right? And the problem is you never know where that experience happens that mattered and who has it. So you can't just have one or two experienced people. You need a variety and diverse set of experiences in order to be able to find out which one is going to be critical in being able to have that, what's Clausewitz called the coup d'oeil. Coup d'oeil. Gary brought up that simplicity has a center, and Clausewitz called it coup d'oeil because Germans spoke in French when they were writing fancy treatises. I don't know why. Coup d'oeil, the critical cut, the critical look, right? What was the essential moment, right? And that also gets into tempo.